I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're here for the purpose of the Committee of the Whole. Tonight is Monday, January 27th. It is 8:10. I would ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Spencer, could you please call the roll?
Budenkoff. Here. Deuter. Here. Dunn.
Here.
Leader. Here. Polonsky. Here. Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy. Absent. Honquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. Agenda item number 2, any announcements? City Manager Grabowski.
Yes, I have one announcement. Last week, the Zoning and Planning Commission opened the public hearing for the Addison Garage development. That was continued, so it's continued to this Thursday, January 30th, starting at 7:30.
Okay, I have 2 announcements. One is, and I think most know this, but District 205 canceled school and all activities again for tomorrow. But I did talk to Bill Gooch and John Quigley, and we are still going to have the State of our City tomorrow morning, 7:30 at Community Bank. Any other announcements before we move forward?
Which community bank is that?
The Community Bank of Elmhurst at the corner of Butterfield and Spring. Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Agenda item number 4. Oh, I'm sorry. Public comments. Clerk Spencer, is there anybody at this time who has signed up for public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor, no one signed in tonight.
Okay. Public comment is an opportunity for anybody in the public to address the City Council and specifically the Chair on any issue they may wish. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes out of respect for other folks who want to speak and us to get through our meeting this evening. Even though nobody has officially signed in, can I see a show of hands? Is there anybody who did not have an opportunity to sign in who wishes to speak this evening? Seeing nobody, we'll move on. Business before the committee. Consideration of Han Street development and finalist proposals. Let me set this up for the council. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago. At that time, we had a couple of pieces of information that the council requested. One was updating the schedules to include the 4-story concept. That is one of the parts of the Morningside proposal. The other was request to have a rendering of the 6-story concept for the Morningside, or at least the request to do so. We left it up to the applicant. As such, the applicant, Morningside, did supply a supplement to their proposal that I believe most of you got. It was posted on board docs, and it does show renderings of their 6-story drawing. In addition, at the time, Morningside did supply some additional information or alterations to their proposal, which the council is aware of. Specifically, they shifted some of their parking from the residential to the public, and they also added a couple of spots, and they are also proposing a change in their proposal of how to handle the public parking policy, which results in potential financial impact. In addition, we also, which was kind of a surprise. We had only asked for additional drawings, and we got some proposed alterations to their proposal. In addition, we did get a letter from Lincoln kind of reiterating and clarifying their position Friday afternoon. That was sent to council members this morning. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read that. So I stated last week, 2 weeks ago, it was my hope and my intent for this committee to choose, I want to get this right, to have a productive discussion and choose, as it says in the RFP, a preferred applicant to move forward with. Now, we did get some additional information, which was a little out of the ordinary, and I've had an opportunity to think about that over the past week, and I did talk to a handful of council members, not everybody, but I'm hoping that we're still in a position to make a decision tonight. If not, I'm going to need firm direction from the council if we want to give any additional direction to our applicants. So, before we get started, does anybody have any issues or questions about some of the new information that we've received this evening? Alderman Bram.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The question is, the additional information that we did receive from Morningside essentially is, to some degree, changing their proposal. Should that, I just want to make sure everybody on the council is under the same expectation here. Should we even take that into consideration when moving forward with the discussion tonight? Because essentially, it wasn't requested. The other applicant didn't have that opportunity, or wasn't, to my knowledge, known to have that opportunity to, albeit maybe slight in some people's eyes, but to change their proposal. So should we all agree at this point to either include or not include that information?
You know, I think that's going to be a difficult one, Alderman Bram. I have talked to the attorneys about this and city staff, and it's a little like trying to instruct the jury, you know, to ignore the fact that I'm wearing a yellow tie tonight. I think the information's already out there. I think City Council will just have to consider, my opinion, City Council will have to consider how the information was received and how much weight they want to give it. I also entertained the idea and discussed it with city staff, and would be willing to hear from City Council on this. Do we want to give Lincoln or either developer a final round to submit additional information? But I think that's a slippery slope, and where do you stop? So I appreciate what you're saying, and I do think that you have to look at the information that was submitted in the context it was submitted. I think it's difficult to tell people you can't consider it because it's information that we got. I'd be willing to listen to any other additional council comments on that as it relates to this additional information. Do people feel like we can make a decision tonight? Do you have enough information? You're never going to have 100% of the information, but do you have enough information to make a decision tonight? Or do you want to ask for additional information? Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just ask a clarifying question on what a decision means? Are we deciding, my understanding is that we're deciding the developer to move forward with, not necessarily a particular design. In the case of Morningside, they have 2 developments. Are we trying to just, is it a choice of 1 out of 3, or is it 1 out of
Well,
the 2
I think we're going to, I would hope at the end of the night, we're going to pick one of the 3 proposals. If you want to split the Morningside into 4-story or 6-story, and then you have the Lincoln that's at 5, we're going to choose a preferred applicant for the city, for city staff to start negotiation with. Doesn't mean that negotiation is ultimately going to result in a contract. We certainly hope it will, but it's just that. We're going to pick, my hope is tonight we'll pick one person, one developer to begin negotiations with. Alderman Bram, you seem perplexed.
I'm perplexed, Mr. Mayor, because it almost sounded to me that you said 2 different things in that summary. You ended with, we're going to pick one developer or one applicant, but then in the beginning of your statement, you made the statement of it would be one of the 2 Morningside proposals or the Lincoln proposal. My view to Alderman Deuter's question is that we would be picking one or the other developers, not the proposal at hand, but one of the 2 developers to move forward with to further discuss.
You know, we can, council, we'll go with the will of the council on this. I ultimately believe that should a decision be made to go with the one applicant that has 2 proposals on the table, I'm going to guess that this council is going to be in a position to eliminate one of those 2. But we'll see what happens.
But not necessarily tonight.
Not necessarily, but we'll see what happens. So, it sounds like everyone has enough information to make a decision tonight, have a productive conversation. And I'm not hearing any request for any additional information from either developer. So we did have the supplemental information, which is the drawing and a couple of alterations by the Morningside folks, and then we had a letter summary of where we are from the Lincoln folks that gave us a little more insight to their thinking as it relates to potential condominiums. That having been said, I'd be happy to start the conversation. Alderman Mulliner.
I think that the best way to start the conversation is where we ended the last meeting, and that is to make a motion. And I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Morningside 6-story proposal and begin negotiations with them.
Okay, let me ask for just a clarification. We have a motion to accept the Morningside proposal at 6 stories.
And begin negotiations.
And begin negotiations, which is what we are talking about. And your proposal is exclusive to the 6 stories. So by virtue of your motion and your vote, you're saying
Correct.
You don't want to go with the Lincoln proposal and you don't want to go with the 4-story Morningside proposal.
Correct.
Okay, that motion being clarified, do we have a second on that motion to continue discussion? Seeing none. Alderman Leader.
I'll second.
Okay. I think we're kicking off the conversation either way, quite frankly. Alderman Mulliner with the motion to move forward with negotiations with Morningside on the 6-story development. Alderman Leader with the second. Alderman Mulliner, do you wish to discuss your motion?
Yeah, this is a project that, as we all know, is very critical to the north end of our downtown area, our city center, and both developers, all the developers that we received were very quality developers, and I believe that we have a great opportunity here. I think that what we have to do at this point is make a decision on what our vision is going to be of the downtown, not necessarily always dollars and cents, even though dollars and cents play a very important role in what we do. There are certain other things that we need to look at, and that is what the appearance of that downtown is going to be, what it's going to do to draw people into the downtown. The 4-story proposal, having said dollars and cents don't make sense, they don't make sense in that case. So I think we need to look at the 6-story. So I think it's a solution that we have to go to is the 6-story. However, I do believe that they've got a project that's in front of us that gives us the opportunity to start off as rentals, and then as the time changes and as the economy changes, can easily be converted into condominiums. And I think that's a very critical piece of what we're looking at here. I appreciate the idea that rentals can be maintained very well. I appreciate the fact that Lincoln can do that and that Morningside can do it, but I think that us having the opportunity to change those to condos, as we have discussed as a council many times, that we always wanted condos there, that we ought to look at giving an opportunity to somebody who can come in here and make it so that it's buildable for both condos and rentals. So I wholeheartedly support the idea of using Morningside, but as I said, we can't lose in either case. They're both very quality developers.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Leader?
Since nobody's going to make any more comments, I will. Excuse me. Short comments. This is a time when all of us can take great pride in our city. This enormously influential project attracted 5 unique and high-quality developers of national standing. Like our AAA bond rating from Standard & Poor's, it is an impartial, sober, and realistic testament to Elmhurst's past, present, and future. Hahn Street is the gateway to the downtown and the anchor of the North York TIF. Given the uniquely strategic location of Hahn Street and the length of the life of this project, which could easily soar to 50 or 75 years into the future, we should not reduce our decision solely to a matter of dollars alone. But if we do, we should remember that to achieve long-term and lasting success in business, one ignores the present and eyes the future. Man does not live by bread alone, nor does he live by aesthetics alone. Nevertheless, aesthetics are important. Elmhurst has no sweeping vistas, no large body of water, and no river running through it. And that is why the architecture, quality, and the durability of the project are important. Make no mistake, tonight is a historical event. Decades from now, people not yet born will comment on our judgment or lack of it. None of us will ever pass this way again. We have at once and a lifetime opportunity to create a project that will be the light, life, and celebration of our city, which will beckon and glow for decades to come, like a welcoming beacon to all. We of this council are called upon to make Elmhurst what it can be and what it should be. I would ask, whatever your decision, try to see it as far as you can and feel for the great forces and inevitable consequences behind your momentous choice. Let none of us be of small imagination. In Daniel Burnham's words, make no small plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Leader. Relatively speaking, that was brief for Alderman Leader. Any additional comments? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion, if possible.
Okay.
To select Morningside as the preferred developer, yet not determine which design, the 4 or 6. Move forward with Morningside.
Well, a motion to amend, is that in order? Does it have, do I have to get?
No, it's in order. I didn't understand the amendment exactly, but.
So the motion is to go with Morningside, but not limit it to 6. Do I need a?
Second.
No, but do I need a? Additional movers?
No.
Okay. Do we have a second on that motion? We have a second from Alderman Deuter. So there is a motion to amend the current motion to accept the 6-story Morningside proposal. The motion to amend is to just make it accept the Morningside, not accept the Morningside proposal. Choose Morningside as the preferred applicant without qualification. Okay. What?
Is that it?
No, it's not at 6, it's either. Right? Either or.
Either or, so
Okay.
as we're selecting the
So
developer.
that's fine. So that's, the motion to amend is appropriate. It's a motion by Alderman Palomsky, second by Alderman Deuter, and the motion is to move forward with Morningside as the preferred applicant without qualification. That's my own point, but that's what I'm going to say to clarify. Okay? So that motion's in order. Alderman Dunn.
Point of
Yes,
order
sir.
on the motion. I think it would be proper to specify that it's one of the two proposals and not open-ended to another concept by Morningside.
No,
I understand what you're saying.
what?
I think the consideration is based on the body of what's been presented over the past 12 weeks or so. So I think that I'll let the motion stand with the council's understanding that we're not talking about building a 17-story building or a 2-story building. So, okay. Additional comments, that motion, the motion to amend is what we're on, it is what before
That's what's before us.
I will be much more eloquent tomorrow morning at 7:30, I guarantee. The motion to amend is appropriate, and it's what we're discussing. Any additional comments as it relates to the motion to amend? Alderman Palumski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The way I see it, we're being asked to make a decision between two developers and to select a preferred developer to continue negotiations with. And I see many similarities between the two mixed-use developments. Both developers are excellent, and both developers seek to meet our needs, focusing on rental housing, retail, and parking. And up to this point, with these presentations and additional meetings, we've been focusing on a thorough financial analysis by our consultants. And I agree with some of what's been mentioned, that we, recognizing that some numbers may change throughout the process, we need to consider which developer better understands the attributes that reflect the needs, priorities, and charm of our community. We need to examine the parameters that more clearly define a community, a development that fits our community, and we need to decide which development will stand out as a cornerstone of our downtown and will be an open invitation to shoppers, diners, and new businesses. Lincoln may be second to none when it comes to professionally and efficiently managing apartments. They respond to the RFP with a quality design. But to me, Morningside answers the call of our community more clearly than Lincoln. They originally spoke to the serious need for flood mitigation. Their proposal seemed more refined and picked up on some details related to traffic flow and amenities and a style that will complement our neighborhoods. I believe the richness in Morningside's design will attract more discerning tenants, and that's across the board, people seeking apartments and businesses looking to open here. Just as a home for sale with a certain curb appeal brings in more open house traffic, perhaps Morningside design would also do that. In considering the value of aesthetics in a development, we should take into consideration that the city and business owners alike recognize its importance, as evident in the facade improvement program that has been established by the city. And since 1991, combined millions of dollars have been put into improvements on the outside of businesses in town to add additional details and attractiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Palumski. Any additional comments? Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification here. We're discussing the amended motion against the motion of
Yes.
the Morningside selection, correct?
Yes.
So we're really not discussing Lincoln at all.
Well,
We're just discussing the difference between the two options presented from Morningside.
I think we can, as chair, I think we can discuss both. I think they're so closely related so that if someone wants to, in this case, Alderman Palumski wants to make a case for Morningside, it doesn't really necessarily have to be just for excluding what Alderman Mulliner had. So I think we're talking about one topic here. It's either one developer or the other. So I'll allow the leeway.
So if we make, follow up, please.
Absolutely. If you want to talk, for example, if you want to talk about Lincoln, I think you could.
I just want to clarify the amended motion, that's all. I just want to make sure we understand if somebody's going to make a comment against the amended motion, that we keep it to that context.
I understand.
As opposed to broader context of selecting.
And I'm willing to allow a little leeway as it relates to overall comments relating to the development and people's thought process.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said at an earlier meeting, I think the two finalists came to the city with different starting points. I believe Morningside started by giving the city everything it asked for and more regarding design, and the development had the correspondingly high price tag. I think Lincoln appealed to our fiscal conservatism and initially put forth very attractive cost estimates. My guess was that the negotiations would yield cost decreases from Morningside and cost increases from Lincoln. And it seems to me this thinking is supported by the memo that was presented a couple weeks ago from Kane McKenna. Based on the follow-up inquiries from staff and the consultants, Lincoln's streetscaping number decreased $375,000. The schools and parks fees increased $152,000. Based on similar conversations, Morningside's earthwork number decreased $300,000. Their stormwater number decreased $450,000. Development fees decreased $173,000. And a change in Morningside's financing structure decreased costs by $3 million. I continue to believe that it will be easier for the city, for city staff and city council to work with the developer to get the numbers where we want them than to get a design where we want it. And the design matters. We want a development that will add value, monetary and otherwise, to Elmhurst for a very long time. The finances are critically important, but the building itself will endure far longer than any impact of its development financing. There are a handful of design elements that I think make the Morningside design superior to Lincoln's. In my opinion, one of the most important differences is the location of the residential entrance. Morningside places the entrance on Addison, and Lincoln has the residential entrance on York. We have had lots of discussions about the importance of the Addison corridor and the role it will play in the growth of our downtown area. A residential entrance on Addison gives the building a second front side and gets more people walking up and down Addison, which lengthens the corridor and adds vibrancy. The aesthetics are another important difference. The Morningside design incorporates timeless style, high-quality building materials, neighborhood-friendly design, and deep setbacks on Addison and the alleys. I think because of the deep setbacks, even at 6 stories, the Morningside building will be more visually appealing than Lincoln's 5-story building. Another difference is the ease of public parking. We know that shoppers prefer to park as closely as possible to their destination. Not only does Morningside propose public garage entrances from 3 directions, from Addison and both the north and south alleys, they designed the parking so that cars are able to park adjacent to the plaza. With Lincoln's proposal, shoppers would park and either walk down a corridor that empties into the plaza or walk down one of the alleys to reach York. The last significant difference that I'll mention is the retail placement. Morningside puts the storefronts along the sidewalk. These spaces will be highly visible from the street and will create a street wall, which our downtown plan recommends. Lincoln's design has the retail space behind the plaza, which is flanked by taller structures that will likely decrease the sunlight that reaches the plaza. In my mind, there is no question that Morningside has a better design. The real question is, how much is it worth? That said, I believe we can continue the negotiations with Morningside to make the numbers more workable for the city. In any case, I think the negotiations should not only address project specifications and cost, but also the structure of the city's financial participation. I'd like the city to explore the possibility of requiring all or some portion of city dollars to be repaid over time, either in regular payments or at the time of a major capital event, such as refinancing, sale, or conversion to condo. Time will tell whether it makes sense for Elmhurst to be involved in another development like this one. However, we're in this one whether we agree with the approach or not. I think we have to see this one through and do what it takes to make sure that this development adds value to the city for the long term.
Any additional comments on the motion before us? Alderman Levin.
Just on the motion that is before us, I felt at the last meeting when I made the motion to narrow it down to the 6-story Morningside versus the 5-story Lincoln, that would help simplify the decision and the discussion, but it was asked that additional information be provided, and it's still open at this point. The motion has been made by Alderman Palumsky to just select a developer, and I think that we need to get it narrowed down to those 2 issues. And if there are those who still believe that there is something, I personally don't believe that a 4-story option is viable, but I will support the motion to the extent that it then narrows the question to one development or the other. And I think we need to make it down to 2 choices instead of 3 before we can move forward. So I will support the motion.
Okay. Any other comments before I ask for a vote on the amended motion, which is to amend the original motion for 6-story Morningside to basically just Morningside, with the note and understanding from Alderman Dunn that we're not talking about completely renegotiating the entire deal, but their proposals in general. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pushed hard last time we met to keep the 4-story Morningside proposal in the mix, because I don't think we as a council have fully vetted the impact that a 5- or 6-story building is going to have on the aesthetics of downtown and its long-term implications for what happens in Elmhurst. I think that it's an important conversation because we issued an RFP that requested developers meet our downtown design criteria, our vision, to have a pedestrian-friendly development, and we seemed at the time to put some emphasis on wanting a project that came in with all of those considerations in mind. I think unilaterally cutting the four-story concept out means that we've already decided that we no longer want a downtown with an aesthetic criteria that is complementary to what we have. And I think that's short-sighted of us. And I think that, sort of no matter what we end up with today, I want us to be very clear that we have made a very deliberate decision by rejecting the building that comes in under the building code and under the criteria that the city so carefully established when we sat down as a community and wrote guidelines for what we wanted our downtown to look like. That this project will fundamentally change the character of downtown and will have a relationship with the other very large project that we're proposing to build in downtown that will now shape our community moving forward. And I didn't think that we could quite so easily dismiss that four-story concept. I believe that Elmhurst has a particular character. I believe that a project can respect that character. And I believe that our decisions do have lasting impact. So I do support, sort of, Alderman Polumsky's amendment that we keep the Morningside four-story project in the mix, at least until we fully vetted it. And I've heard no discussion here about how our decisions as a body are going to affect the way our downtown looks now and for a very long time. Personally, I don't want to see our downtown turning into Arlington Heights, and I don't want to see downtown Evanston, and I don't want to see downtown Oak Park here in Elmhurst. I do think that we have an identity and that many people recognize, and it's not just people that have lived here for a very long time. It's also people that have moved here recently who have a sense of what our downtown should be. And I think either the 6-story or the 5-story project will fundamentally change that character, whether they have a relationship with the neighborhood across Addison or not. And so, I am hoping that others will weigh in on this because I really would like to hear why all of the council seems to feel like rejecting something within those criteria is completely appropriate. Because I don't think it is appropriate, and I don't want to reject the 4-story project out of hand. If we had been so serious about it, then we shouldn't have put a whole bunch of other things in our RFP about other criteria we had intended to consider, because perhaps we never intended to consider them.
Okay, any other comments? I'm going to ask for a roll call. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Wagner.
Chair. Sorry, one more clarification here. I've been confused. I've been accused of being a good listener, but sometimes can't hear. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the amended motion, that if it passes, there is no discussion on Lincoln.
Oh, no, the amended motion is just to change the motion that's before us that we're discussing. So if the motion to amend passes, then then that motion becomes the main motion, which is approval of Morningside as the preferred applicant. So we will then continue our larger discussion.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, seeing that, I'll ask for Clerk Spencer to call for the vote on the motion to amend.
Okay.
Point of order, simple majority.
Yes, simple majority. So this is for the amended motion.
Which includes both projects,
Yes.
both Morningside.
Both Morningside, it's,
Yeah, okay.
yes,
Three of them back in play.
basically. Clerk Spencer.
Okay. Polumsky.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York,
No.
Levin,
Aye.
Healy, absent, Honquist,
No.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Mulliner,
Aye.
Wagner.
No.
I have 9 ayes, 3 nays, 1 absent. Oh, Gutenkopf, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Aye.
All right. 10 ayes, 3 nays, 1 absent.
10 ayes, 3 nays, 1 absent. Motion to amend carries. That is now the motion before us on the floor, which is, Clerk Spencer, do you have it written down of what our new prevailing motion is?
What I put down may be different, what I've heard several
that-
conversations, but I heard to amend the motion to have Morningside be the preferred applicant without qualification.
Is that, I'm asking the mover of the motion, in this case, Ms. Polomsky, the motion to approve Morningside as the preferred applicant
Yes.
without distinguishing between the two. That's inferred, but we all know what we're saying. And Alderman Deuter, you second that motion. So that's the motion before us. So, further clarification, Alderman Wagner, we can discuss the pros and cons not only of Morningside, but Lincoln at this time would be appropriate. All right. Any additional comments or questions as it relates to either of these applicants, whether you support the motion or not? Alderman Hipskin.
So, we're about to make a big vote, and we're voting on who we're going to start negotiating with, whomever it turns out to be. If these negotiations do not favor the city, I don't support the negotiations, and I don't support whomever is voted in. So remember, we're at step one. We've done this before. This is a beginning. We're negotiating. This isn't the final contract. So everyone keep in mind that what we're doing now is going into negotiation to get the best deal for the taxpayers. That's what we're here to vote on right now.
Okay. Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add, and it will be very short, just a couple of comments. To me, this is a difficult decision between Morningside and Lincoln. Over the time of the Hahn Street proposals or project, it has changed somewhat from the beginning of time to where we are today. I think it is crucial that Lincoln made it clear to me during previous discussions about this project that they were solid on their proposal. They were not willing to go down on the number of units. They needed those number of units to make the numbers work, to make the project work overall. I personally believe that the financial aspects of each of the applicants is way more dollars than I am comfortable with from an incentive perspective. I think the Morningside proposal is significantly way, I'll say, over the top from a dollars perspective. I do like the option, though, that Morningside is willing to negotiate, or willing, I shouldn't say negotiate, willing to discuss due to the fact that they did provide a 4- and 6-story proposal, so they're willing to look at a smaller project in regards to number of units. But with that said, I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, happy from the request of incentives that Morningside has put forth, either for the 4-story or for the 6-story project. Alderman Leader and Alderman Mulliner made some comments in regards to it's not about dollars alone. I hope those comments are taken into consideration as we discuss whichever developer we decide to move forward with, because I think that's very important to the taxpayers on what project we select, but also, as we've talked about before, this is a building that will be around for 50 to 100 years, and we need to consider all the other aspects being architectural design. With that said, I do support the current motion to move forward with discussions and negotiations with Morningside. One of the main reasons is their willingness to provide us with a 4-story and a 6-story proposal. So I hope that we can move forward and then further discussions on what is appropriate for the Hahn Street project overall.
Any other comments? Anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. As everybody has indicated, and I certainly agree, we have two excellent qualified bidders in this process. Being kind of a numbers guy, I look to those, but before I look at numbers, I kind of look at, like we all have, what does downtown Elmhurst want to look like? And I think that our residential market is missing the rental, the high-end rental component, and I'm very excited about that aspect, that hole being filled here. And I think it's something that we need, that we really, really need to develop the base of the community as we age and as we grow and as we change. I'm excited about Lincoln and their management capabilities and the fact that I think they're dedicated to having a forever high-end rental community here. And I think when you look at some of the information that was contained in the information that was sent out this morning by the city manager, some of those numbers are really exciting about the age of the person who lives in their properties and their disposable income and those types of things. And those don't change over the time like, say, for example, a Crescent Court where perhaps somebody who's 45 moves in there and they live there until they're 75. We're seeing a constant evolution of these 25 to 45-year-old people kind of coming in and out of that building. And I think that will add a tremendous vibrancy to the downtown area. I think it'll add a lot more economic incentives that aren't measured in any of the numbers that we're seeing here as far as estimated gross revenues, because that just kind of contemplates what's occurring within that particular project, within Hahn Street itself. Whereas I think you take an apartment dweller and put them in the downtown Elmhurst area, and I think you have a much higher return overall than if you don't have that type of person in the area. So I think we have two great choices. I just don't believe in my heart of hearts that the smaller project has any viability whatsoever. When you factor in original land acquisition costs of over $7 million, you're looking at a hit to the taxpayer of $5.3 million over the project life, and take it to the other side, to the Lincoln side, where all things being equal, and again, the understanding the whole thing is a negotiation. We pick somebody, and we can tweak what we need to tweak as far as aesthetics and mix and all these types of things. We're looking at, after we take out the original land costs, of having a $3 million benefit to the city. It's hard to ignore those numbers. With that being said, I would probably, at this point in time, be more in favor of having our negotiations with Lincoln versus Morningside, but again, I don't think there's a lose situation with either one. Thank you.
Alderman Levin.
Thank you. We went out and we submitted a request for an RFP. We've got a number of proposals, and I do think we very properly narrowed it down to the two best proposals. And it seemed to me as I went through this process that I know quite a bit, I think, about each of the developers, and they both are, if we look at some of the factors, they're both high-quality developers. On one hand, I felt that Lincoln had better economics. I look at a lot of the factors, such as what it's going to cost them to do the development, but as it comes down to me, the most important economic factor, if it's real, is what does it cost the city to get it built? That's the basic economic factor that I want to look at as a city. But I also know that we had a number of other criteria, and I know that when we selected those criteria, I was the one who kept leading the charge on it's got to be something that fits and looks right, and we'll have different definitions of that. I don't care about the discussion on whether it's condos in 10 years or apartments, because I don't think you can predict that. I bought my first residence. It was a condo that had been an apartment, that had been built to be a condo but became an apartment because the interest rates at the time were 17%. So what the economy dictates in the future and what the needs of the community are 10 years down the road will in large part dictate what happens to that development. If it stays rental, as other aldermen have said, I don't have a problem with that. It's a higher end rental, and it will bring people into the community who will go out and shop and use the amenities of Elmhurst. To me, with all the qualities that are there, I don't think the economics are as disparate as they were when we first started. As things go on, they keep narrowing down. I don't really have that much confidence that Morningside's numbers are going to change that much because they're pretty exact. But all being said, I think it comes down to which proposal was the best in total, and I think that Morningside gets the benefit here. It gives the benefit. The design, as Alderman Deuter mentioned, is thoughtful. The setbacks, the way it fits into the community, and a better vision for what will be an enduring piece of architecture that will be at the gateway of our city and will hopefully lead to quality development to the south.
Pretty much done.
So my endorsement and my intention is to support the Morningside proposal.
Any other comments? Alderman Dunn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I would definitely concur with everyone on council. We have two very good proposals that would bring a lot of benefit to the city. Very attractive building concepts, and perhaps one slightly more than the other in some of the council's opinions. But looking at the purely the economics of the decision, the Morningside concept, the sixth floor, is about a $5 million additional higher cost building to put up. And what do we get with that? We get one extra floor. The retail component is similar. The number of units, parking concepts are similar, but potentially with the Morningside concept, we have a slightly more aesthetically appealing structure, which is important. We definitely here in Elmhurst feel very strongly about the character of our architecture. What do we get also for the $5 million? Lincoln is asking $2 million less help, and they're also returning about $1.5 million more to the city, so getting about a $3.5 million economic benefit from the Lincoln proposal, as opposed to the best economic proposal from Morningside. With that, I would suggest that the Lincoln concept would be a better economic decision and quite a functional and very attractive structure moving forward. Again, I think we'd be happy to have either, but to be stewards of the taxpayers' money and looking at the financial implications, I think the Lincoln proposal has a slight edge in this particular case. The 4-story with Morningside is out of the question. It's just too big of a hit for the taxpayer. Should we move forward with the Morningside? I do not believe that is something that should be considered at all. Thank you.
Any other additional comments? Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, appreciate that. I agree with Alderman Dunn. We do have two very impressive proposals. I don't know if there's a need to discuss the third one. There isn't really, there's very little to no financial incentive benefit to the residents of Elmhurst for their 4-story. At least I can't see it. But the other two, I think, I think we should keep in mind that we're not out of the woodwork yet in this, this economy. And paying an extra or getting a little less, little is my word, it's $1.2 million less for from the Morningside folks for the land. That alone tells me that I think we're going to have some strong negotiations if they are successful in passing this step. My take is, as always, I think we should look at things, if we're going to look at things 50 years down the road, and we have a financial disadvantage for one or the other, I would seriously make sure that we understand this is a selection not so much out of aesthetics, because that's going to be negotiated after we get past this step, but it's really, and we have to make sure that we understand this, but it is about the numbers. Solely about the numbers, and it is a gateway. I'll use Alderman Levin's terminology. I think that's a great aspect to look at it. It's going to be a great building for the residents of Elmhurst, and it's going to be a big project. And I think if it's not about the numbers, what is it about? So I would say Lincoln definitely is a favorite of mine, and I would suggest all of you to make another personal look at the numbers if you so choose, but I do believe that the financial benefit to the residents, which is what we should be concerned about, is on the Lincoln property, not on the Morningside one. Thank you.
Very good. Any other comments? Alderman Levin.
Mr. Mayor, we are in committee of the whole.
Yes.
As opposed to council, so is it appropriate to call upon our consultant to ask a question?
Yeah, I certainly believe that if you feel it's necessary.
I do, because I want to make sure I understand the finances. It's been said that the difference in the two proposals, just the financials, is $5 million. And the numbers I looked at in terms of looking at the comparisons between, and again, as I said at the outset of my comments, I'm not concerned about what it cost a builder to build. I could regard that as their cost, but in terms of what the land bid is, what the permit fees are that are asking to be waived, what the, comparison is between those dollar for dollar, so that we know, is the city really spending $5 million more with Morningside than with Lincoln?
Thank you. From our standpoint, when we put a comparison, I mean, the way we looked at it as it related to an apples to apples, it was really in chart or exhibit D, it was really closer from our end to about a $3 million differential as it related to the net revenues generated by, and I'm talking basically for the two 6-story proposals, or 6 and 5-story proposal. There was a wider differential, almost $8.3 million as it related to the 4-story. But if I understand your question correctly, really when we looked at it, apples to apples was closer to about $3 million, a little over $3 million.
And whether we consider it or not, I saw in the memo that came from Morningside, they were proposing a reduction, a narrowing of $400-something thousand.
Right, that would narrow that a little bit as well.
And they were throwing the ownership of their additional parking spaces, which and I assume their valuation is correct at 25,000, which would further narrow it. Plus, under both proposals, under Morningside, we own the parking, and we would not under Lincoln.
Let me clarify, Alderman Levin, I believe the Morningside trade-off on the $400,000 increase in their land offer was contingent on them owning and managing the,
On Morningside?
yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions or comments before I ask for a vote on the motion before us? Okay, before I ask for the vote, let me just clarify. It is a motion to choose Morningside as the preferred applicant. The result of this vote, should it pass, this council is giving permission to city staff to begin negotiations with Morningside. Should it fail, we will continue our conversation. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Clerk Spencer?
Oh, the Polumsky. Oh, Mark, okay. The underlying motion.
Well, it's the main motion now.
The main
'cause
motion.
The main motion, which is to instruct city staff, or to approve Morningside as the preferred applicant and instruct city staff to begin negotiations. Alderman Polumsky, you agree with that? Alderman Deuter, yes? Alderman Polumsky made the initial motion.
It's Alderman Mulner's motion.
Oh, it just got
and
amended.
it's amended, right? So it's the motion as amended.
Alderman Mulliner made the motion, Alderman Leader
Right,
has the second.
right, okay. Mullenor,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Polumsky,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Hipskin,
Aye.
York,
No.
Levin,
Aye.
Healy, absent. Honquist,
No.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Wagner,
No.
Gutenkopf,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn.
No.
Looks like 9 ayes, 4 nays, 1 absent.
9 ayes, 4 nays. That motion passes. City staff is instructed to move forward with negotiations with the Morningside Group. Just a few comments. I want to thank all of the applicants, not only the finalists we ended up with, but all of the applicants who got to this point. And I think Alderman Hipskin said it best in that this is the beginning of negotiation. There's a long way to go before we put a shovel in the ground. I think the city is very fortunate, very, very fortunate to have two what I will call A-plus developers interested in investing this much money in our town. It's times like this where it's too bad that we had to choose one person. But the last thing I'll say is that I think city started acquiring property for this project in 2001, and it's well past the time that we put a shovel in the ground and get moving. So I hope we have fruitful negotiations, but I encourage city staff to do so as quickly as possible, but still getting us the best result. Alderman Gutenkopf, you had a comment or question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, because I think that, I mean, as a city council, we still, as a council, haven't vetted that discussion of what aesthetic we want for downtown. And so, I mean, I do appreciate that we've decided that we want to work with Morningside. I think the council still has a responsibility to discuss how we move forward with that and which one of these concepts we think is the most appropriate. I think that I just don't feel like we've vetted that discussion as a group, and that by asking city staff to move forward with the negotiation, we still have this big unfinished discussion or responsibility to talk about that.
Well, I had a conversation with city staff and city attorney before this meeting, and this is about as far as the details can get when it comes to an RFP and making a decision. But you're right, we're moving forward with an RDA, and I think we're going to have several meetings as it relates to ultimately what we think this should look like, both aesthetically, and there's still a decision to be made, and potentially a decision to be made on the height. So yes, there will be further discussions, but to ask either one of these developers to move further into digging into their construction costs, et cetera, we needed to make a decision at this point and ask city staff to move forward with the RDA. But I think we asked city staff to come back to us with next steps as to how to address that so we know exactly what we're getting.
So, if I may, the next thing that's going to come back to the council is not going to be one proposal or the other.
No.
It's still going to be part of this conversation of which proposal and what does the final thing look like.
I think that was clear based on this discussion that city staff, that this council has not chosen either one of the concepts, but we've just chosen the developer. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other comment? Alderman Levin.
Well, at the last meeting, I made a motion to exclude the four-story building. And there was a request at that point saying it was premature because more information was requested and the information was provided. In my opinion, it's very difficult to proceed in a negotiation where financials are going to be specifically discussed when the developer doesn't know what we're talking about. And I felt it was important to make a decision on the developer because we're mixing two different topics, how high and who's our chosen party to negotiate with. At this point, what I've heard from the council is there are 4 aldermen who voted against the selected vendor in significant part because of the economics of which would be further disparate if we went with a 4-story building. I also believe that we have gone a long, long way on this topic when no one has ever raised the issue of can we go with 5 or 6 stories. That topic could have been broached a long time ago, and now we're at the point where after 2001 to 13, 12 years, we're selecting someone to start a new round of negotiations with. That topic is being raised again. And once before, I felt somewhat, I had offended one of my fellow aldermen by making a motion that cut things a little bit short. But before we delay that further, I personally don't believe that there's a will to spend the kind of money that the city would have to spend. And we have had an opportunity to consider this topic for many months. And no one ever brought it up and said, we've got to knock out these 5 or 6 story proposals. No one ever said that we can't have an RFP that goes above that. And so I will, again, now that we've had the information, and now that we've selected a vendor, in order to have a more productive and fruitful negotiation, I move that we eliminate the 4-story proposal and go with the 6-story proposal as we proceed into negotiations with Morningside.
So your motion is to eliminate the 4-story option for the Morningside group.
And let the council see if there's, a willingness to go for 4 or 6.
Second by Alderman Hipskin. I want to confer with the city attorney for a minute. Okay. I discussed it with the city attorney, and I think it's appropriate to entertain that motion. At this point, we have chosen a developer. It's up to the city council whether or not they believe they need additional, would like to pursue multiple paths with this one developer, or if they want to move forward with eliminating the 4-story proposal. So the motion before us was a motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Hipskin. Alderman Levin made his case. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment or opine? Alderman Hipskin.
I second this motion as Alderman Levin was bringing it up, because the 4-story complex economically does not make sense. We have been spending a lot of money, taxpayer money. I think in the long run will be very well invested money, but right now it is money that 4 stories doesn't even come close to making economic sense for the taxpayers.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I'd like to quote something that we heard earlier tonight. This is not solely about dollars alone. And I agree with that. This isn't about dollars alone. This is about what we want our downtown to look like. I think that the Morningside 4-story concept has more going for it than just economics. It has a relationship with the buildings around it, and it has the potential to speak to future construction in downtown. I've said it before, I have an idea of what I think our downtown should be like, feel like, and look like, the relationship it should have with the surrounding neighborhoods, and the precedent that it should set for the rest of downtown. I think 6 stories is too big, too tall, too massive, and I appreciate the economics, but frankly, we've already spent the money on the land, and at this point, it's really about the quality of the building that we get, what it looks like, and what it says about how far we're willing to go. I'm not willing to go 6 stories. I think it's too much. I think it's too massive. I think the 4-story concept had some strong aesthetic criteria, a strong aesthetic sense of what it looks like and how it fits, and I think that should be a primary driver. All the other pieces that went into that building and that design, and that's what I think we should go with.
Any additional comments? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I have difficulty once again with the motion to deny any further discussion of 4 stories versus 6. I know it's the opportunity due to the motion to discuss that tonight. I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves because honestly, I can't decide if 4 versus 6 is 4 is appropriate or 6 stories is appropriate solely based on the numbers that have been provided. I feel the next step is to be able to have that, as a council, have that conversation with the developer that was just selected and talk about the financials, talk about what could and should change going forward on both sides of the coin, the 4-story versus the 6. I think there's also an opportunity, even though it wasn't as part of their proposal, to discuss 5 stories, a compromise between the two. I think there's a lot left on the table here before we jump the gun, what I deem at least the jumping the gun, of totally eliminating one option that this particular developer put forth, from the get-go of the RFP. As I stated already earlier tonight, one of the reasons, if not the main reason, I was willing to consider Morningside moving forward is due to their willingness to have a smaller sized project in this area. We do talk about upfront costs here a lot, and that's the financials that have been provided to us. And that is something that I take seriously, no matter if it's talking about selling right-of-ways here in the city, if it's talk about our vehicle replacement schedule, sidewalks, et cetera, down the line. But there's also the down-the-line costs. If we build something that is over-congested, if we build something that doesn't fit in this square area, what are the down-the-line costs? How often are we going to have to worry about traffic studies and rerouting traffic? How often are we going to have to worry about accidents in the area, pedestrian conflicts, bicycle conflicts, et cetera, down the line? I think there's a lot that we need to discuss, and I think before moving to a development agreement, before taking that next step, I would like to have a conversation, the full city council, with the selected developer, to see how flexible, to see how sharp his or her pencil is, to move forward and make a final decision on how many stories should be in this location. Aesthetics come into it. The size of the project, though, weighs heavily. Finances weigh heavily. And I think even though we have a lot of the detail, I think further discussions are needed before we jump to eliminating one of these options, not considering the middle compromise option, which is 5 stories. Again, I say compromise option. And then lastly, the dollars and cents of it all.
Okay, any additional comments? Seeing none, I want to be clear on this motion. The Morningside proposal had 2 options, 6-story and 4-story. We could have done this one of 2 ways, either motion to go forward with the 6-story or motion to eliminate the 4-story, and by default, you end up with the 6-story. So in this case, we have, the motion was to eliminate the 4-story option.
And consider the 6-story option only.
Was that part of the motion, and consider the 6-story, or was it just to eliminate?
Right now, my motion was to eliminate the 4-story option.
And I'm going to say by default, that leaves us with the 6-story, so no further discussion is needed on the motion itself.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That's okay.
The motion is to eliminate, right now, the will of the council is to move forward with Morningside to begin negotiation. Sorry, I want to get my phrasing right. As the preferred applicant, the Morningside proposal has 2 options in it. One is 4-story, one is 6-story. Alderman Levin has made a motion to eliminate the 4-story option, and that's what we're voting on. That is what the motion is, and that's what the second. Yes, eliminate the 4-story option from the Morningside proposal.
My thinking was you eliminate the 4-story option, you're negotiating on the 6. If they came up with 5, I suppose it could happen, but I've had mixed results in suggesting 5-story compromises on buildings that might be 4 or 6, so hope does not spring eternal. But my motion is simply to eliminate the 4-story option as being one that is not viable.
And as a result, instruct city staff to move forward with the 6-story. That's what we can infer from that. Any other comments or questions as it relates to this? Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to please call the roll on the motion, which is to eliminate 4 stories from the proposal.
Levin.
Aye.
Tipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy is absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Right, it looks like, let's see, did I leave someone out?
11-2.
Yeah. 11 ayes, 2 nays, 1 absent.
11 ayes, 2 nays, that motion carries. City staff has further clarification on their direction. Where's my agenda? Is that it? I think that concludes our business for the evening. Agenda item number 5, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman York with a motion. We do not have a second. Alderman Wagner,
Sorry,
do you have a question
quick
or comment?
Forgive me, it's more of a, we had a heady conversation. I just want to confirm with the city manager, my Christmas tree is left out in my parkway? Sorry, I'm out of turn here on the agenda. My fault.
Take the lights off.
For those that have the Christmas tree stuck to their parkway, like mine, they will eventually come and pick it up, so.
Is that true?
I made a mistake and didn't bring that up earlier, but we got into the conversation. Forgive me.
Thank you, Alderman Wagner. Motion to adjourn by Alderman York, second by Alderman Mulliner. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.